For me, the club and my friends at the club were my saviour.
The club was always part of our life. It was, you go to school, you went home, you went to club.
But all my friends in later life were Brady people, and it's just the way it was.
People say that not many of the boys in the East End went to university. I can only recall 2, maybe 3 boys going to university. To me, Brady was our university.
People wonder what would have happened to us if there wasn't a club to focus on.
I would not have been the same person, and nor would many of the others who attended the club have been the same persons if it didn't exist.
Part of my upbringing, I suppose, has followed me all through my life. I suppose I treat people like the way I learned at Brady.
Getting us off the streets and into a social atmosphere where we wanted to be in that club and mix with people in the club and enjoy the activities. It kept us occupied, it kept us engaged, it kept us from doing things that perhaps we shouldn't have done.
Really, they transformed our lives.
My full name is Michael Joseph Lazarus, and I was born on the 12th of September 1934. I grew up in a tenement block which had been built by the 4% Industrial Dwellings Company, which was a project of the Rothschild family. The Rothschilds and some of their acquaintances decided to build blocks of flats, Brady Street buildings being one of them, Nathaniel buildings in Spitalfields being another, Evelyn Court, the one I lived in, being another, to house, well, what they described as the Jewish working poor. And if you were Jewish and working and poor, you could rent a flat, in our case at the rent of 16 and 9p a week. Mother was a housewife. She had four sons, came from Warsaw, and she had no other family in Britain. My father came from Lithuania with his father, mother and some siblings. Originally there were 9, two of which died in infancy. And my father served in the First World War, and when he came out of the army, he went into tailoring, and that's what he was in for the rest of his working life. We were poor, everyone was poor, but you didn't know you were poor because that was the world you were growing up in, and there was nothing in those days to actually compare it with. So as children, we just grew up in these blocks of flats. Lots and lots of children, which was wonderful. Always someone to play with, always activity in the playgrounds. I look back on it as a extraordinarily fruitful time. Very, very happy childhood. I've always said that growing up in these blocks of flats was the best thing that could happen to a child. It's just lively, always there was activity all the time. There was a huge sense of neighbourliness. It was interrupted by the war. It was interrupted by evacuation. My brothers and I were all evacuated to the same village in Cornwall, and there were all sorts of problems, and in the end we all came home. So we were home by the middle of 1942. There were no schools when we came back because all the schools, the children had gone to the countryside and all the teachers had gone with them, so they had to set up emergency schools for children who returned. And then in 1943 we had the incident with the bomb. My mother had put dinner on the table. Friday night dinner was Friday night dinner. It wasn't like any other night. We always sat in the passageway of the flat because there were no windows, because blast was so dangerous. And this bomb fell, and everything around us fell in. And remember calling to my father, "Daddy saved me, Daddy saved me." I was sure we were going to die. In the event, none of us died. But the following morning, I had a stammer, which then made school life very, very difficult. Simply because nobody took any notice. You had a disability, that was it, you lived with it. There were no treatments available, there were no psychologists waiting to help you out, so you just got on with it. Teachers didn't ask me questions in school because they knew I was going to struggle to answer. Some of the kids mocked me when I tried to speak, so it had a huge effect on my self-confidence. I didn't take any exams at school. I left as the moment I could, and went to a body called the Sabbath Observance, because I came from a family that kept the Sabbath, and they said, "Well, what would you like to do?" And I was particularly good at woodwork. In fact, I was very good at woodwork at school. They put me into this apprenticeship. That was it, until I joined the Brady Boys Club, and then everything changed. It was the first time since I developed the stammer that I found any understanding of the difficulty. I just found it a place where you could, be yourself, very energetic, lively, active, extraordinary atmosphere in the club. The club was managed by mainly men who came from wealthy Jewish families, educated men, who we used to call West End Jews, because it's distinct from East End Jews. I found them to be quite extraordinary, easygoing, able to talk to us and us able to talk to them. One day I was sitting in the canteen, and a man called Peter Perry told me that he ran the discussion group in the club, and would I like to join it? And I explained to him, well, he could see for himself that I didn't really speak terribly well. I stammered, and I would find it difficult to manage in a discussion group with a group of boys who could speak fluently and express themselves articulately, and I was unable to do that. And he said, no, don't worry about that. They'll understand. I understand, and you can. Please come and try. Let's see how we get on. And I did, and I just found the atmosphere so conducive that I began to regain my self-confidence. And as I regained my self-confidence, I regained my ability to speak. I became, I think, very, very good at it. So much so that when I was, I think it was probably 17, a producer from the BBC came to the club. They were planning a new programme for under-20s. It was called Under 20 Parade. And they were looking for young people to present this programme. So he came and listened to the discussion group, and he chose 6 boys from the group, and asked us to come to an audition at the BBC. And on the due date, we all went together to Broadcasting House in Portland Place, and we were ushered into a conference room, big table in the middle of the room, and on one side of the table were sitting 6 boys in school uniform. We were introduced to them as 6 boys from Harrow Public School. And we were given a subject to talk about. One side had to defend a proposition and the other side had to support the proposition. Extraordinarily, it was no contest. After a relatively short while, the producer told the boys from Harrow that they could go home, and we were left with the 6 boys from Brady. He eventually chose 2, and I was one of those 2 boys. That is entirely due to the club and the quality of its leadership and the people who came from the West End to improve us and certainly did a great job. There was a very high level of discipline, but it was not discipline that was enforced. It was discipline that arose from the ethos of the club and the atmosphere in the club. I always look back on Brady and wondered how it was that a large number of boys in one building at the same time, night after night after night, and there was literally no violence. The club stood for something, it meant something, and I think Yogi gave it that sense of purpose, and it had a lot to do with Yogi, in my view, being German, being a refugee, and like myself, I came from a family that had terrible losses during the war. Jewish life after the war had to be somehow expressed in an optimistic way. There was nowhere else in Europe where this was possible. And I think Yogi was determined that we would not be cowed by that, but that we would be the best we could be. And that in a boys' club meant you were going to be the best at football, and you were going to be the best at cricket, and you were going to be, and so on, and you were going to be best at drama, and it was a club that was absolutely imbued with that sense of purpose.